Electric vehicles, they're all the talk these days. However, from differing viewpoints, certainly depending upon who you talk to. For example, some people are raving about EVs, saying they're the greatest thing in the world to help save the environment and combat climate change. Others, well, they're dissing the EV industry, saying it's a threat to all of mankind. The truth is, this argument is somewhere in the middle. There are lots of pros and cons with this industry. The positives, we have some of the latest and most innovative high-tech rides. Have you seen some of the new electric cars and trucks? They're crazy sleek, crazy stylish. EVs reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, proponents say. We get rid of those gas-guzzling cars and trucks that pollute the air and water. The new electric engines, they're fast, they've got lots of horsepower, and they're now being offered in almost every make of car, truck, minivan on the market. However, there are also lots of negatives, let's be honest. The mandates. Critics say they're bogus. No one should be forced to purchase an EV, especially when the technology is expensive these days, or at least more than much of what the gas engine vehicles cost, and there are concerns about the real-world distance these EVs can travel. There's a shortage of charging stations that can make commuting a bear for the everyday driver. And the electric grid, well, it's going to be overtaxed with millions of EVs on the road, and the jury's still out on some of the reliability of the electric motor technology. So that's the honest story, pro and con. And joining me now to discuss the EV industry, the pros and the cons, is BJ Birtwell. BJ Birtwell is the founder and CEO of Electrify Expo, North America's largest electric vehicle festival. He has spent the last 25 years in the car culture industry and has now taken that quarter-century wealth of car knowledge into the electric vehicle industry as the electric craze. Obviously, it's making its way throughout the U.S. and the world. BJ Birtwell, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Lots to talk about. I'm looking forward to getting into this discussion. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Now, obviously, for our viewers, you have a vested interest, you could say, in the electric industry. You're founder, you're CEO of the Electrify Expo. We just had that report all about the Electrify Expo. So with that said, as you know, there are many pros, there are many cons to this. Can you distance yourself from this argument and give us both perspectives? Because as you also know, some folks, listen, they are crazy about EVs, others hate the industry. They say, oh, big brother, they're upon us. What's your take with those arguments, BJ?
It's pretty easy for me to be balanced on this because I actually came into the industry as an EV skeptic. I didn't like EVs. I actually didn't have a good opinion of them. And I formed all of those opinions before I'd even driven an EV. So I always felt like, and I was a car guy, so I always felt like if I couldn't hear the rumble of the V8 or the sing of an inline four turbo, like forget about it. You're never getting me behind the wheel of that car. And then I finally drove an EV and I had my light bulb moment and I realized that I had it all wrong. And it was at that point where I knew that the experience with an electric vehicle of any kind, whether it's an electric car, electric truck, even an e-bike, those experiences are the real game changer for people to have their light bulb moments and realize how the fun factor of going electric and what going electric really means. So I can absolutely have a balanced conversation about this. I'll tell you something that's a little surprising. Our mission at Electrify Expo is not to tell everybody that they must go electric. In fact, at Electrify Expo, we just provide 1 million square feet of experiences, and we allow people to come into Electrify Expo, have an experience with electric cars, and figure out if it's the right thing for them. So we're really just trying to provide those experiences, like my story, and allow the consumer to make the decision on whether or not they want to go electric.
So speaking of your story, what sold you on the electric vehicles?
Well, people come to electric vehicles for a lot of different reasons, and we can dive into this. Especially in the first few years of the industry, most of the EV adoption was happening by people who had more of a sustainability or an eco-conscious mindset. They were early adopters of electric cars. They had already made up their mind that they wanted to go electric. They didn't need to understand the whole technology even. They just wanted to do their part for the environment, and so they made a decision to go electric. Well, fast forward to 2024, we are now at a stage where we've gone through that first wave of consumer, and the next wave of consumer has come in. And that consumer is not an early adopter. They don't even have necessarily an eco-conscious mindset. In many cases, they're skeptics. So we're really here to provide those experiences to those types of people so that they can decide whether or not electric is the right thing for them.
Give our viewers an overview of where we're at with the EV industry, let's say here in California and then throughout the U.S. with regards to simply what's going to be going on with this EV industry in, let's say, the next 5 to 20 years?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not an analyst, and I'm not an expert in predicting the future. What I can tell you, I guess what I am an expert in is listening to thousands of consumers who are going through the EV shopping experience. And what I see happening over the next several years are some big changes. Number one, we're gonna see some mass EV adoption because people are going to have more experience with EVs. And as people get more experience with EVs, they realize that change is uncomfortable for a lot of people. But once you actually go through the experience and you realize how awesome the electric vehicle ownership experience is, it's in many ways addictive because the driving experience is so tranquil and so fun. Like the thrill factor and fun factor of these cars are so great. The lower cost of maintenance is an amazing thing. The technology in these cars are amazing. So all of these things, especially the technology in these vehicles, are going to advance considerably. So the electric car that we see today, especially from, say, for example, battery technology, will not be the same in 5 years. So as those things develop and these cars become more affordable, longer range, they charge faster, a lot of these questions that people have about EVs will no longer be such an issue, and therefore more mass adoption will happen.
You said the billion-dollar word, affordable. The EVs, they're still pricey today, relatively speaking, more expensive than, say, your average gasoline car.
You know, I see it differently. I think that there are a lot of electric cars out there that are pricey, but look what's happening in the market. I mean, there are EVs that are now priced in the $30,000 range, and now Tesla and General Motors and others are preparing to go under 30. So, you know, we're really reaching price parity with gas vehicles, and that's one of the things that we really face and struggle with consumers. Is a lot of them are coming into the festival with expectations or with, you know, knowledge that might be 2, 3, or 4 years old, and that whole re-education process is a real issue because these cars are going faster, meaning they're charging faster, they are going longer, and that is an education process that people need to understand. So I love to see how the automakers have absolutely just upended many of their business models to accommodate the desire to go electric. These automakers are doing a great job. I mean, it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago, this was really a one-horse race. And now you come to today and look at all the offerings that are in the market. Not only can you get a compact size EV, now you can get a third row SUV electric vehicle. So the offerings are all there, and the automakers have done a really great job of making those offerings available. And I'm sure you've seen it too, that's just expanding. There's more and more vehicles, electric vehicles coming online, more trims, more models, more competition from overseas. So it's going to be a very competitive market.
Yeah, I do give you that. I'm shocked at how many electric vehicles and trucks and minivans there are out there. As you say, it seems most all the car makers are now building EV. With that said, BJ Birtwell, you've been in the car industry your entire life, adult life anyway. I mean, you're literally working with, directly with every automaker, whatever, Ford, Volvo, Tesla, Toyota, BMW, Rivian, and others. What are the manufacturers telling you that we, the public, don't know? You know, what are we not privy to? Because I know there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on in the electric vehicle industry.
Oh, the automakers are so great at keeping secrets. So I'm not sure if I hear more than you do. I hear rumblings. I know that these automakers are developing new products and they're coming to market with some really exciting products. There's automakers that have been late to the market that are coming in over the next couple of years with some really strong offerings. Obviously, we're seeing the Chinese auto manufacturers who are going to be attempting to enter the U.S. market here at some point with really competitive offerings. And that'll be an interesting decision for the consumer to decide. Do they go with a brand that they know and that they trust? Or do they go with a brand that has a really economical model, but they don't know so much about the company? That's going to be a really interesting time and an interesting kind of a competitive marketplace. So, what I am hearing from the auto manufacturers and really just from consumers overall, because I think we need to address the real world challenges that are a part of this industry. It's not all rosy. There are things that can be done to speed up the adoption of electric vehicles that is not necessarily happening at the pace. Like I just mentioned, the automakers are doing so much to retool their factories and manufacturing facilities to churn out these electric cars. But at the same time, they're doing their job, and we're not seeing EV infrastructure rolled out at a pace that makes the consuming public feel comfortable about going electric, because they don't see chargers everywhere. So that's a real world challenge. Another real world challenge right now is just, we're not talking about it enough, but the high interest rates on auto loans that's hurting people wanting to go shopping for a new car. I mean, these are all real world challenges. But I'm really yes, I do own a North America's largest EV festival, and I certainly want to see it continue to grow. But at the same time, there are real world challenges, and I think that we got to address that mostly through education.
And I really do appreciate you taking an objective approach to this and talking about the pros and the cons, which, if you listen to the liberal media, EVs are the greatest thing in the world, and they keep marketing that. If you listen to the conservative media, it's the end of the world. Neither of which are really true. Again, it's somewhere in the middle. I want to get back to something you said that's important, and we shouldn't ignore this thing that you mentioned. You said that when people go to your Electrify Expo, certainly consumers are so interested. However, you mentioned maybe they're preconceived notions. They have information about electric vehicles that may be a bit old. I am going to grant you that, because obviously back in the day, people thought, well, these cars, their distance cannot last the way a gasoline engine can. The cars are more expensive. There are other problems with the cars. And yes, the industry has advanced, and so you are correct about that. But I will counter you on one thing, because as a reporter, I'm out in the street, I'm out in the field talking to so many people every day. And when you go to more rural parts of California or more rural parts of the country, I talk to a lot of people like, well, we need the big sport utility and the giant minivan that, can put 10 people in the truck, and an EV just can't do that. Or you talk to some, we love the off-roading, or they're farmers, and, they have their big monster truck 8-cylinder engines, and they go off-roading, or they're hauling, or they're pulling things on the back of their truck, and they're convinced that an EV just isn't prepared for that now. You say, what about those critics who still say, it's not for us?
Well, some people are scared of roller coasters before they go on them, but once they go on them, they actually have a really great time, and then they want to get in line right away to go on it again. I don't agree with the rural community not being bullish on electric cars, and let me tell you why. If you look at home ownership, the rural community has a lot of home ownership, and if you have a home and you can charge at home, you basically have a fueling station at home. I've owned my EV for 2.5 years. I had the luxury of charging at home. I've charged in the wild once. And when I mean in the wild, I've charged out in the wild once in a public charger, and I didn't even need to. I just did it because it was there. Like, you charge at home. So the beautiful thing about living in the rural communities and having access to a home and being able to charge at home is that these vehicles, even the fully electric vehicles, they're going 300, 400 miles in range now. So yes, you're definitely stretched out on those country roads, and I kind of live in a rural community, so I understand it. But I'm a perfect use case. Never needed to charge in the wild. Now, there are instances where, yes, there are real world challenges where in heavy duty situations or medium duty situations where you need a truck that can tow and haul. I think that the industry still has a ways to go in order to provide the type of product to that consumer that can alleviate those concerns and challenges. That said, let's just say you're an electrician, or you're in construction and it's light duty, there are offerings out there for you right now. So There is a lot of education that needs to happen, and that's why experiences are so important. Because if I can put that person who's a skeptic, and they're my favorite because I was one, so I identify with them. When the skeptics come to our shows and they have their experience in an electric car, and I see them leave different than how they came, it's like boom. That's what we're trying to do here, is just give the people their experience so that they don't have to listen to the media, they don't have to read it in the paper or online. They have their own experience and they can understand, hey, this could actually work for me.
BJ Birtwell, are you concerned about the fact that there are many anti-electric industry folks? They insist that electric vehicles are not going to help the environment. Obviously, climate change is a thing so many folks talk about today, but they're claiming the opposite. They say, electricity obviously uses fossil fuels for its production, coal, what have you, and they're questioning where is the benefit where the environment is concerned. I know you're not a scientist, but you are a car expert, and this is really your field.
True. I'm not a scientist or an analyst in this regard. I think that's a real world question, and that's a real challenge. I will tell you that the way that we find minerals for batteries today might not be the same way or the same minerals we use in batteries 3, 4, 5 years from now. In fact, it's very likely that it could change. So I think that those are real challenges that need to be addressed. But if you look at the actual whole process from mining the minerals to building the vehicle and owning the vehicle, all the research says that once you get to that year and a half point of driving that vehicle, it's lights out. There is no comparison that vehicle is yielding significantly less CO2 than what a gas car would continue to yield. So there are absolutely environmental benefits to owning an EV, but there's still real challenges on how we mine for the minerals and how the automakers build these vehicles. Absolutely.
Can you compare and contrast for me an EV, an electric vehicle, electric car, electric truck versus a gasoline engine? To be honest, I'm kind of old school. I have an old truck with a big monster engine. What should convince me to get an EV? Compare and contrast the two.
It's gonna depend on each shopper. For me, it's instant acceleration and the thrill factor of EVs. Once you've felt that, it's hard to go back to a gas car after that, if that's of any interest to you. In a nice car, internal combustion engine car, there's so many moving parts, right? There's pistons going up and down, there's a crankshaft going around, there's a camshaft going around, there's all these moving parts. It's interesting, you have an electric motor and you lift up that hood on an EV and it's almost like a shock. You don't see anything there. In fact, the hood on an electric car is actually called a frunk because there's no engine under there. It's almost like an extra trunk in the front. So that's what EV owners call it, is a frunk. And but the electric motor is instant acceleration. It's obviously super quiet. And that's a head scratcher too. When you're in a vehicle and you hear the revs of the engine and you feel the rumble and the vibration, going into electric car, especially for the first time or so, it is just such a tranquil and more relaxing experience to drive. And I just can't properly explain it. You have to do it. You have to experience it for yourself to understand the tranquility of it. So, it's on one side, I'm saying I love the thrill factor of these EVs. On the other side, I'm saying I love the tranquility. It kind of seems like just juxtaposing opinions, but they just really mesh well together. So I would say, that's a big part of it. And the great thing about electric motors too is, there are some EVs that have a single motor. There's some EVs that have 2 motors. Some have 3 motors. Some have 4 motors. It's pretty amazing what you can do with these cars with 4 motors. So it's definitely a different ownership experience.
We talked about this just for a second earlier in the interview. You were mentioning the infrastructure. With so many EVs expected to be on the road in future years, can our electric grid, can we handle this? Because so many critics are saying we're already so overly taxed. We don't have the electric infrastructure to support the EV industry.
No, we've all seen it. We've all read it. We've heard governors ask for limited charging during peak summer days. Like we see it too, and that's a real question. I think that any industry that is going through a major disruption, and there is a lot of innovation happening, it does put a strain on innovating the other parts of that industry that are going to be needed in order to make it work. I mean, I use this example sometimes, but when we went from horse and carriage to gas cars, the way that people got gas, because there were no gas stations, right? People were buying gas cars and there were no gas stations. People had their gas delivered to them by milk truck. So we're not at the milk truck phase. We're a little past that, but it's absolutely a real challenge, and there are experts, working hard to address that.
In our remaining minute, the final question: why do you believe that this argument has gotten so politicized? From the liberals, the conservatives, the left, the right, it's not a car issue anymore. It's a political discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I got to get a couple points on this. One is, the more that we make EVs about climate change and about sustainability, the more we're alienating what we all want, and that is for people to buy electric cars. So if you're on the side of sustainability and you're environmentally minded, you certainly want more people to buy electric cars. The issue is that the continued message that we hear is about being environmentally conscious and about climate change, and that's why you need to buy an EV. But the way that we are going to achieve mass adoption is not by talking about environmental benefits, because the other half of the consumers that are out there don't care as much about the environmental benefits of the EV. It's a great byproduct. That's fantastic. Good. We're all accomplishing the goal that we want. But the more that we talk about it, the more that it draws skepticism from an audience that doesn't want to hear it. So I think that's one major point. The other is that it's just, look, let's be honest. Left-leaning audience has gravitated to EVs much faster than the right-leaning audience. So if you're a political candidate and you're trying to appeal to a voter base, it's an issue you can address. It shouldn't be. When have we ever politicized another form of transportation like this? We don't need to polarize transportation. There's really no difference in terms of a gas car and a diesel car and an EV. They're all vehicles. They just use alternative types of fuel. So we got to stop politicizing EVs. It's definitely going to slow down EV adoption if we continue to do that.